In this video, I'm going to tell you how to get your miniature paint job to tell your story.
Warning, Uncle Adam is not a professional. He's usually not even very good. Try any and all of Uncle Adam's pro tips at your own risk. Void where prohibited. Uncle Adam is not actually an uncle.
In most situations, there is some sort of story behind your miniatures, and generally almost everybody else's miniatures as well. The story might be stuff that the people who made the game wrote. We've talked about lore and fluff and things like that. More likely, it might be something that you, as the person who built and crafted these miniatures, something that you came up with in your head, and that's the story for your miniatures. And it is a story that is banging around inside your skull, and you can tell your friends and your opponents and whatever about it. But just like art, intention is important, but what the actual person who sees it gets from it is really, in a lot of situations, the most important thing. Now, this probably all sounds a bit like a bit of flim-flam as far as, artist's intention and all that kind of stuff. We're talking about tiny little plastic people, toy soldiers, frankly. But there's still a story, and that story is informed by the way that your models look, the way that other people perceive your models on the table. It has to do with how they are painted and the way that they're painted. Not necessarily the quality that they're painted, but the way that they're painted. And if they are giving a cool story and they're on a table that's a cool story with all kinds of great terrain, and your opponent's also got, then you've got a lot of immersion going on, which really helps to add to the game. So what am I talking about story? Because sometimes you can be telling the wrong story with your paint. I love grunge. Now, when I'm saying, I don't mean the music. I mean, I do. I like the music too, don't get me wrong. I was of the right age when it came out in the early 90s. I was in, early college, whatever. What I'm talking about is a grungy model. I love to paint grunge onto models. I love enamel washes. I love throwing brown and black and sepia wash on everything. Sepia wash all the things, at least in my opinion. And so I like things to look like that and look grungy. But your story doesn't always necessarily mean that this thing should be grungy. When you're painting Nurgle, you're painting some Nurgle dudes, maybe, let's say, for, Warcry or something like that, which I've done relatively recently, then grunge. But when you're painting Stormcast, it's not necessarily a good idea to go down that road. I love the process of sitting and just tapping and stippling and layering and grunging up a blade and all that kind of stuff and everything. But generally, I don't know personally for the story of my particular Stormcast for Warcry that they should look as grungy and dirty as the Nurgle guys, even though I really enjoy doing that kind of process, that stippling. And I made a video about it, but ciao. I love the process and I love doing it, but it doesn't fit all the different possibilities of story that you might have in your models. There's a saying that says, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And people can do that in miniatures. I've done it in miniatures a whole bunch. I love to make things rusty and grungy and whatever. Here's this, I think it's a Luther pattern tank from Dust, the Dust 1947 game, but this is actually a model from earlier, back in the day when that was all through Fantasy Flight games. Anyway, it's very rusty, and in most situations, actual military vehicles are generally almost never that rusty. Like it could have been out in a battle for a while. It would be dirty and muddy and grungy, maybe have some bullet holes in it, take some tank shell rounds that bounce off of it and stuff like that, but it shouldn't be that rusty. Unless I'm telling the story that we're pretty late in the war, and this is one of the few of these left, and, there's just not a lot of time to put a lot of spit and polish on these. Every time that they do get to finally come back to the base, they're in battle a lot. When they come back, it's all about just getting it to run again and getting it back out on the field. And that's the story. That's the thing that you're trying to put across. But if I had a Stormcast Eternal who looked as grungy and rusty as that, you'd have to ask yourself, if you're paying attention to the story that comes from Games Workshop in that particular case, why is that guy so grungy? Like, he shouldn't, there should be people that polish his armor. Like, that's kind of their job or something. I mean, dirty and muddy, covered in current battle ick, sure, great. But rusty, like, heck, half those guys are gold. Does gold even rust? I don't think it does. This is my point. So just because you love to do a certain type of paint job, just, let's flip it around. you shouldn't make probably Nurgle guys look perfectly polished and smooth. Like there should not be like their weapons should be dirty and rusty. If their stuff is like, if you went through and actually took green stuff to smooth out all the pits and the little bumps in their swords, that would be weird, right? Right? Like if you went through and painted up the guys so that they looked completely healthy, that would be weird. That wouldn't be Nurgle. So thinking about taking not just like the paint that you like to do, but thinking about like, why is this thing painted this way? Or why am I about to paint it this way? Is there a reason for it? Because if there's not, it kind of gives a bit of a cognitive dissonance to your entire paint job on that particular model. So if there's a tip here, I guess it's this. Think about your models and why you're painting them or about to paint them the way that you're going to do it. If you look at a model and you think of the story behind what's going on with it, and you say, I bet this particular model, maybe you're doing something and it's a very fastidious kind of HQ unit. They would not be grungy, you know what I mean? But if the pose on that unit is that they're in the thick of battle amongst, the rest of the soldiers and all that kind of stuff, and they're a lead from the front kind of person, if you want to paint them up to look like they are currently, just caked in mud because they're out there, just with knife in their teeth, shooting two guns, and all, then, knock yourself out. That's what adds to the story and makes the model look more interesting than just trying to paint it probably like it looks like on the website or in the catalog. I don't know if they make catalogs anymore. So think about the way that you're painting your models and give it some time and let it kind of marinate a little bit and think about, am I just doing this because I love painting so clean? Or am I doing this and painting this thing super grungy and gross when really this guy probably shouldn't be? Think about that and then let that kind of steer the way that your paint jobs go, and you'll probably make some stuff that really ties your entire group together and makes the story the most important thing. Now this all sounds like yibber-yabber, doesn't it? That's not a word. I don't think that's a word at all.